Welcome to the Recruitment Hackers Podcast, a show about innovations, technology, and leaders in the recruitment industry. Brought to you by TalkPush, the leading recruitment automation platform.
Hello, welcome back, faithful listeners, to the Recruitment Hackers Podcast. I'm your host, Max Ambruster, and today I'm delighted to welcome to the show Shiran Danoch, who is the CEO and founder of Informed Decision, which is an interview intelligence platform. Did I describe that right?
Yeah. Great. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Thanks, Shiran. Great to have you. While I'm not quite done with the introduction, you're a PhD, and what was your doctorate in?
In people analytics.
People analytics.
So I'm a psychologist, and my PhD is in people analytics.
Okay, so that's n that's the n plus one on a psychometrician. You're like you went all the way to the PhD, and now advising companies on how to make better informed decisions. So that it's in the title of the company. So
exactly.
I'm delighted to have you here, and I wanted to have a discussion with you about what employers how the decision of what assessment platforms to choose entails in 2025, because I think on this very show I invited a lot of assessment providers a few years ago and became familiar with the space. I'd say probably 80% of them have been acquired by somebody else by now. And I think they've been replaced by 10 times the number of companies. So it's just, it went from being so complex that I needed to talk to 10 people just to understand the lay of the land, to today, it's even more so. There are like literally dozens of vendors who offer to specialize in a specific brand of assessment. And then there are probably like a dozen vendors that are a little bit like a test gorilla that offer a great panel of assessments that offer anything under the sky. And then there's local experts who have a more high touch approach, who meet in person and do face-to-face interviews before they build a model. There's just so many options in 2025 that it is confusing, and I think it takes someone who is maybe a little bit a technologist, because technology has an important role to play, but primarily a practitioner, to help sort it out through all these decisions. Because if you just listen to the technology providers, everyone can do everything and they promise a lot. But as a practitioner and somebody who came into the field from the academic side, I'm hoping you can poke holes into some of these stories and help some of our listeners, make the right decisions.
Yeah, I would love to help. Actually, like that's my mission. That's my career mission, to help make exactly those decisions. So I'll get started, and feel free to stop me and ask questions anytime. But the underlying framework for every tool that you decide to adopt, and basically for every action that you take in talent acquisition, should be: what are the most important KPIs for an effective hiring process? There are three that you should always take into account. One is accuracy. Of course, you want to hire the right people, right? You want to make the right decisions. So accuracy is first. Then there is also fairness. Fairness is, okay, I want to hire the right decisions, but I want to do it without discriminating different groups in the population. I want to make sure that my process is fair, that it has a respectful candidate experience. So fairness is the second. And the third KPI is efficiency. Of course, I want to make sure that I'm utilizing resources properly, that I'm making the process as short as possible. So those three KPIs should be kind of our underlying values for assessing every solution or action that we want to take in talent acquisition. Now, when you're coming to a point where you need to choose a vendor and you have so much options, then first you need to think, like, between these three KPIs, what is the most important to me right now? It might be that it's actually efficiency, right? I'm getting like tons of CVs and resumes, and I don't even know how to handle it. Like, who do I move forward with? So it might be that now efficiency is the most important thing. And then your considerations will be different than if it's accuracy, because if it's accuracy, you might want to go for a longer assessment. But if it's efficiency, you might say, okay, let's do something that is relatively short and will give us something to make an initial decision. So how do you prioritize? First of all, based on those three KPIs. Now, it's also related to your assessment needs. So, am I trying to hire for a specific position? And am I looking for a solution that is comprehensive, that kind of covers a lot of different positions? That is also it's a different choice, right? Because Max, like you said, there are solutions that are more kind of high level, and they have more of generic models that say these are our 4, 8, 9 competencies that we're looking at, and they're relevant for most roles, like being a team player, emotional intelligence, growth mindset, effective communication. These are relevant for most roles. So if I'm looking for a kind of all-encompassing solution, then I might go for something like this, which is a kind of a more of a generic model. I see that you have a question, so I'll stop.
Just want to pause for a second. I'm listening to you, imagining, I'm in the buyer's seat and deciding, okay, what Shiran is saying is actually all of these vendors have a place in the ecosystem, and she's kind of sending the decision back to me. I have to take stock of who I am, what's important to me, and so on. But I don't feel like I'm creating a scenario here. So I don't feel like I'm an employer who doesn't have highly differentiated needs. Like you said, I want team players, honest people, good communicators, and so on and so forth. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here. So I guess, but by default, I'm gonna ask someone like you, who's the market leader, and I don't want to make a decision that's going to get me fired or get me into trouble. So maybe I'll go to an SHL or someone like that. That's probably the psychology of the buyer for a lot of buyers, right? I just don't want to take any risks. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If we're building on that, like if I'm considering a smaller provider who's not a top brand and where I think there's maybe more inherent risk, then how do I approach it? How do I minimize the risk if I'm working with a smaller vendor? Maybe the risk that you're describing is on these three different elements. Obviously, on the third element, which is the efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I can understand that a little bit better because as a recruiter, I know what efficiency gains I'm going to get. But what about the first two? How do I check that the test works and that it's fair?
Yeah, that's a great question. So assessment providers should, I'm saying should because many of them don't do it, but they should validate their assessments. And a validation, in a nutshell, what it means is that if I'm making a recommendation as an assessment vendor, I'm saying this person, I give him a score of an 8 out of a 10, and another person is a 5 out of a 10. Then what I need to do is to sample some of those people that were actually hired by the companies that I'm working with and look at their performance. and to see if the scores and recommendations that I provided as an assessment vendor, they correlate with performance. Meaning, if I gave a higher score, this person was actually a better performer or stayed in the company for longer. Anything that might indicate a better fit for the company. So that's called predictive validity. And the larger assessment firms, they do it. They usually, like if you don't ask for it, they won't show it to you. But some of them do have it in their websites. But in order for you to make a decision based on accuracy or predictive capability, then you should ask for that data. Have you done a validation? For which positions have you done it? Can I see the data? What is the correlation that you found? All these types of questions.
Let me push back a little bit here, because I'm a technology vendor, as you know, and I think as an entrepreneur, one of the key skills for being a technology vendor is a certain level of creativity. You have to come up with solutions where there are none. So if I'm a creative assessment provider and I'm being asked to provide a validation model, I will find a way, right? But then who's going to validate the validation study? Because you're describing a validation where you have to use hiring data to check if the assessment works. But a lot of these assessments are not, they're generic, right? They're like, I'm testing communication skills, I'm testing reasoning skills. These therefore would need a validation study where you have maybe a human assessor who's validating the reasoning skills and the communication skills, and then you do a correlation analysis between what the AI says and what the human says. That's your validation study, right? That's how most vendors would operate, I imagine. And does that meet your expectations that you were just describing?
No, I understand that this is an intermediate way to do it, because like you're saying, like it takes time to accumulate that data, and like you can be creative about it. I think eventually on the person that makes the decision, the recruiter, the chief talent officer, etc., they need to learn how to ask the right questions. And yes, they need to have someone that is data savvy in their team to be able to assess this critically. I think as an intermediate stage, yes, you can say, let's take the assessment, let's give it to a mixture of our current employees that consist both mediocre performers, top performers, low performers, and let's see what it says about them, about their fit for the roles that we're trying to make it and make decisions about. And this is something that is called in the scientific language concurrent validity, because we're running the test and we have the performance data at once. And so this is an intermediate way to do it. But eventually, you want to see with time if it's able to predict. Another thing is, of course, that the job market is changing in such, like I can't put it in words, the pace that it's changing. But what you see is that assessments mostly stay the same. So you have like companies that have the same shelf product running for 20 years. Think about what happened to the world of work in 20 years. And the assessment isn't changing, although the world has changed so much.
Scores are going up since 2023, right? With the rise of GPT, it's like everybody's doing better on these assessments.
So surprisingly, everybody's doing better. Exactly. So how do you manage for that? I think, of course, AI providers have a lot of advantage, because also their systems are learning and improving, right? So compared to more traditional assessment vendors. But of course, AI and everything related to AI also has its cautionary things to be aware of.
I want to go back to something you said with the concurrent validity study. Would it be your recommendation to practitioners when they're evaluating an assessment company, therefore to ask this assessment company, give me 200 free tests. I'm going to run them against my team, and then I'll run an analysis to see if this test is predictive. And then, you said you want somebody in the team to be data savvy. So what's the threat, what's the next step for that data savvy person? Let's say they've run these 200 assessments, and correct me if my scenario is bonkers, but let's say they run these 200 assessments and they come up with a sort of a predictive value. I don't know what the term is. Maybe a correlation to performance. With a, I don't know what's the I think it's a 0 to 1 figure, so it's like a 0.6, 0.7, and that would be okay. That would be a passing grade. And then you'd run the same test with another assessment, see if you can get higher. Am I on the right track?
Yes. It can even be much simpler than that, because what you just described, it requires more than someone that is just like basically data savvy. So first of all, I think, if you go to a head of talent acquisition and tell them take 200 and now do 200, like they will have a heart attack just from hearing that, because that's like a whole operation right now, do assessments for two. It can be less than that. Like the minimum that you need for a statistical analysis is 30. Okay, you can do 50. Okay, you can do 50, and then basically you don't even need to go into correlations and complicated stuff. You can put people into categories: high performers, mediocre performers, or low performers, or even if you have a smaller group, high performers and low performers. Okay, and then you categorize them, and you also let the vendor categorize them based on their fit score or whatever they're compiling. Okay, and then you can see how much does it align, your categories and their categories, and that's an initial validation for you that it's in the right direction.
Okay. And that could be run. I mean, I guess most vendors would be okay to give a few free assessments and to run that. But maybe where they're going to push back is they're going to say, it takes time to design these assessments. Every project is custom, so we're okay to do that, but you have to pay up front, kind of thing. You need a minimum commitment, I imagine.
It's kind of a policy, I think. Especially if it's customized. Like I'm talking as a vendor that customizes our products for the client, and yes, it does take resources from us to customize. So I don't think you should necessarily expect the vendor to do it for free, but it could be a POC with some kind of a basic fee to see that it works. Eventually, you'll also learn from it as a company, like as a buyer.
Yeah. Okay. And
of course, don't do it with 10 vendors. Do it with the two that you went through, due diligence, and you're more certain that they are the right direction for you.
You mentioned the pace at which candidates are changing, and so you recommend revisiting these assessments and their design on which cadence, every year, every 2 years, more or less?
Really depends on how fast you accumulate data. Because if you're hiring, I don't know, 10 or 20 candidates a year, okay, you can do it every several years. But if you're hiring for a specific position, or overall, like you have hundreds and thousands of candidates, yes, I would suggest to do this yearly. And also today, with the technology that exists, it's not such a huge process. It can be done fairly efficiently.
What do you recommend in terms of running assessments in person versus virtually? Because it's been so easy to cheat these days and to get really good answers from LLMs. I think there's a little bit of a push to bring people back to a recruitment center and to in person so that you can validate their ID and create a controlled environment. Are you seeing that with your customers, that it's kind of like back to the real world in order to validate identity, or people are still committed to running most of these assessments remotely?
Yeah, the latter, I don't think it's realistic. Um, that people will come back. Even if you force that and you'll say that's the way that I want to work, you lose a lot of very qualified talent, and that's a shame. I think eventually this is the world that we live in, and we all have to adapt. And it means coming up with better solutions on how to, avoid cheating, which is, of course, something that you're dealing with, and all vendors are dealing with. But for sure, there will be solutions. And eventually, I also want to say that I do believe that it's not that the entire process needs to be done by machines or AI. Eventually, you can't hold machines accountable for decisions. You hold people accountable for decisions, and especially these types of important decisions about people's livelihood and career and futures, etc. So there needs to be humans in the process. For me, the most important aspect is to have them in the interview process, and that's what we do as a company. So we empower interviewers with technology, but we don't replace the human interviewers. And
You're
eventually,
creating guidelines for the human interviewer to run their assessments.
so we
Yeah.
have like a structured infrastructure to hold skills-based interviews in a data-driven way, and also to provide interviewers with feedback about the things that they're doing well, their biases, and tracking their improvement over time. But I think eventually we will have we work in a virtual world. That's how most assessments will be conducted. Even if you're interviewing me, most likely uh, you won't do it face to face, or at least some of the interviews will not be conducted face to face. And I could be, even now, like I'm speaking with you, how do you know that I don't have a ChatGPT open and I'm just reading, right? You can tell, of course, from my body language, from how natural do I sound, etc.
I
But
can tell. I can tell those flowers behind you don't look totally real.
right, yeah, that's my cheating for this podcast. The virtual
Yeah. Do
background.
you even know how to take care of a pot of plants? I don't know. I mean, you're maybe misrepresenting your
My
green
plants
thumb.
are plastic also in my house. Like I can't. I don't know how to take care. I have two kids. I try to take care of them, but plants is beyond me.
Okay, if you can take care of kids, then I think the plants can wait. Um, I mean, you painted a very sort of inclusive. You're being inclusive to all the assessments at the beginning of this chat. You said, if you're focused on efficiency and you want to give a quick answer to everybody, there's these kinds of assessments. On the other hand, if you want to have as accurate as possible to future performance, and there I'm going to say actually the ultimate test to see if somebody's going to be good on the job is really to hire them and find out if they're good on the job. I mean, that you can't beat that, right? That's called a probation period. So I think all of the assessment world lives within that space. Very basic. Hello, can you do the job? To something almost like on the job assessment, and then there's this just so many choices in between. Do you recommend? I mean, are you seeing that some employers are have like along that journey from candidate to employee, they have they have a first assessment just for the front of the funnel, and then a second assessment when you start the work, or the day on your first day on the job or something, that's going to help to fine-tune the training and onboarding.
Yeah. So what I'm seeing is use of multiple assessment platforms throughout the hiring process, like in different stages of the hiring process. So for example, if it's the pre-screen and you just want to make a decision that is not just based on CV because all CVs look the same. So you do an initial assessment of a personality, skills, something kind of very initial. And then the candidate goes through the process. And for example, like it's a technical position, back-end developer, front-end developer. Today, like you have all these types of platforms that actually do technical tests or professional assignments. Like you have platforms that you can actually do the professional assignments in and get scored. So this is what I see, and this is also what I recommend. Eventually, you have or you should have a profile, which is the definition of what are those core skills, values, motivations, behaviors that comprise of the ideal candidate. And then you collect data throughout the process, even if it's with different vendors or different tools. Eventually, you should have a framework that says these are the skills that I'm assessing with the different tools. And now, when I'm coming to make a decision, I have some kind of a mapping or a score of the different skills that are aggregated from the different tools. And now I can make a data-driven or an informed decision that also informs my upskilling efforts. Because what you can see is I've decided to hire this person, although they could be improved in detail orientation or in their communication. That's what I decided because it trade-offs with other skills that are more important for this role. But now when I have this data, I can actually know that these are the things that I should be upskilling them for. And I think a key pain today that I'm seeing everywhere is that the talent acquisition and talent management processes are disconnected. They speak in different languages. You might be assessing some skills in the hiring process, and then on the job, like on the job performance, the yearly performance review, it speaks a completely different language. So how come those things are not aligned, and how can your hiring decisions inform your upskilling decisions, etc.? I think this is still a huge area that needs to be addressed.
It sounds like a lot of people are going to need your help in this world, and I'm gonna ask I'm gonna wrap it up and ask how the audience can get in touch with you. But before I do so, I always ask all my guests a question to kind of put them on the spot a little bit and reflect on a hiring decision that they made that was a poor hiring decision, and reflect on the mistake that they made. It is, you know, I don't mean to be rude by it, but everybody makes mistakes when it comes to recruitment. So, can you think back to a time when you hired the wrong person? It doesn't have to be a complicated mistake, but just a mistake that comes to mind.
Yeah. So first of all, I'll say, like, very honestly, I made a lot of hiring mistakes, and I'm a person, thus I'm biased. And that's exactly why we need supporting mechanisms. Me too, even though I'm designing this, I'm still a person. And so, every time something like this happens, and I kind of do a postmortem and try to understand, like, what can I learn from it for the next time. And I'll tell you what are the key reasons for me making these types of mistakes. First of all, pressure. Okay, you need to hire someone. You have a lot of projects. You have new clients. You need to make a hire now. And you say, okay, it's not the ideal, but I can make it work because I need that person. So making it out of pressure. The second is, for me, like when you're starting to build a startup, initially you're on your own. And you're making decisions fairly alone. Now, if I'm the only single perspective, then that's it. Like I will probably make a mistake. In order to make an accurate decision, you need to integrate multiple tools and multiple perspectives. Like when you have one perspective, most likely you will make a mistake. So making decisions on my own is also something, is also a key mistake.
If you're a one man or one woman startup and you're making the decision on your own, I mean, it kind of makes sense because you have to get along well with that person you're going to be hiring. And then there's no assessment in the world that's going to tell me who I like to work with. Like that's something I have control over with.
I agree it's an important criteria, but it's not the only criteria. And sometimes we have the halo effect from people that are highly charismatic and friendly and build trust, but you also need go-getters. You need people that are persistent, that are adaptable, other things that you don't get from likability.
Yeah. You need the scrappiness. People with bruises and, bumps on their heads. Yeah. Great. Okay. So you made a hiring mistake under pressure in the past. Is there a particular person that comes to mind where you realized afterwards you cut corners?
Yeah, a few. A few. I think when I look back on it, that's the third thing. I've noticed something already in the interview, like the same reason that they got fired. I took a note on that on the interview. They actually got a lower score in that skill, but I discounted it. I said, okay, they're great at other things. So, okay, I can work with that, but I couldn't. So it's also about understanding that there are critical go, no go filters or go, no go skills that if the person doesn't have the necessary level, then you're not moving forward, even if they're great at other things. So that was also a key learning for me.
Because you're going to put them in a job where they'll never be a fit, and be like, you can spend the next decade trying to overcome something, and if it's just not within your personality, it's never going to feel genuine and authentic. So pressure is something to stay, you got to stay on your toes, stay honest. Okay, great. So Shiran, we could go on for a while because this is such an exciting space, but I think people should just come and talk to you. Where can they get a hold of you?
So LinkedIn, of course, Shiran Danoch. They can also email me at shiran@informeddecisions.io. So I think these are the main avenues.
Thanks again for coming, and have a very automated 2025.
A very accurate, efficient, and fair 2025.
Right. That's better.
This conversation with Dr. Shiran Danoch helped me understand that there is no black and white answer to which assessment should I use, and there is no absolute right way to do it. Rather, there is a spectrum between an assessment which is there to increase productivity and the candidate flow, and a more thorough assessment, which would be, maybe in person, maybe in office, or on the job, and everything in between. Shiran has the tools and the expertise to guide the employers through how to create and validate a psychometric assessment. And I think that it's a function that needs to be built in, any sort of mid to large size company. So I hope this is helpful for those organizations that are ready to make that commitment.